Hey, did you know that if energy cannot be created or destroyed, where does it come from? Question mark. That's not a did you know, that's a question. Anyways, so this article in New Scientist talks about that it's insane and incredible, but the sum total of the universe, of the energy of the universe, that is zero. So nothing needed to be created as far as energy goes when the universe came into existence. Even though there's a huge amount of energy in particles and radiations that pervade the universe, the energy may be balanced by negative energy caused by the gravitational attraction between the particles. Stephen Hawking explained when you pull two objects apart, you need to expand energy to overcome the gravity that pulls them together. As it takes positive energy to separate them, gravity must be negative energy. And if that theory is correct, then there was never any need to create energy or matter. They cancel each other out. That implies that the Big Bang could have started as a simple statistical fluctuation. It also means that it may be possible to create our own Big Bang, just squeeze some vacuum in the right direction, and bingo! New universe, no energy required. And it goes on from there. Why do I read to you all of this interesting information? Because we're going to dive in to Rabbi Manis Friedman as he goes over the dumbest argument or attempt to prove that God exists that he's ever heard, plus the worst argument for God that I've ever heard. I know his video says plus the best, but I'm spoiling it for you. It's actually just as bad as the first argument he presents. Here we go.
There was this guy on the radio talking about intelligent design. You know, you can't explain the existence of stuff on the world without believing in God. And somebody called the radio station and said, do you know that people used to believe in God because of thunder? How else do you explain thunder? Who could make a sound like that? Only God. So because they heard thunder, they were convinced there's a God. Then they found out what thunder is. Right now, we don't understand, for example, how human blood came into existence.
Yeah, actually, we do. You don't, but scientists do. So, there's a whole tangent that I could go off on, but I'm not going to because he's going to give a, he's not done yet. So, what he's explaining is the appeal to ignorance, the appeal to personal incredulity, and also God of the gaps. These are all three fallacies that he's talking about now, and that he's saying, hey, look, I heard this happen on the radio. These are bad arguments for God. And I agree. They're bad arguments for anything. I don't know. Therefore, fill in the blank is an appeal to ignorance. I can't be X because that just can't be appeal to personal incredulity. And finally, well, it must just be God is, of course, well, it's the God of the gaps, just putting God. I don't know, therefore God. Yeah, it's the God of the gaps. And that falls in both of those categories of appeal to ignorance and or personal incredulity, depending on where you put God in your gap. Don't put God in your gap too long. It may cause swelling.
Because you can't put it together piece by piece. So evolving won't create human blood. So the only explanation is God created the world. So this guy who called in said, you're doing the same thing. You don't know how blood can come into existence. So wait until next week. You'll figure it out. How does that prove there's a God? So let's back up. First of all, what do we mean by God? Like somebody says, what gives God the right to intervene in my life? Interesting. Intervene. I have a life, I exist, and he comes and intervenes. Then he's not God. That's like saying, how dare genetic stuff interfere in my life? Genetic stuff is your life.
Did you miss it? All right. So he complained, rightfully so, about the appeals to ignorance / personal incredulity / God of the gaps fallacious reasoning used by the person on that radio station and the person that called in and said, hey, look, you're just appealing, you're doing the same thing they used to do. And he's like, well, wait a minute. We need to go back to what God is. Well, okay, sure. But before you go back to what God is, you need to show that God is a thing in the first place. You have a definition of God, but that's not the same thing as demonstrating that God's a thing. You have not demonstrated that God is any of the things that you claim God to be, including, in this case, something akin to the fabric of reality. Show that there's a God, then you can say anything you want about it after that. Until then, these are bald assertions. But wait, it gets better.
Yeah, I don't need this genetic stuff messing me up. Yeah, you do. Without the genetic stuff, there is no life. So if we're talking about God, we're talking about the reality behind our existence.
Okay, so according to him, God is the reality behind our existence. Man, I know that I've heard this idea somewhere by pre-suppers, probably. Oh, no, I have heard this idea by pre-suppers. It's God. God did everything. Can't explain everything without God. Wait a minute. If I put what he just said in some sort of, what's one of those things that I like to use? Syllogism. That's it. If I put it into one of those, I wonder how it would sound. Let's see. What's behind reality? Don't know. Therefore, God. Doesn't that sound a little bit like what he started complaining about in the beginning? But he didn't say it in that way, deconverted man. You're twisting his words. Well, no, you're right. He said the thing that's behind reality, without God, you can't have reality. See, that's what he's saying. Because he doesn't know how reality came to be, so therefore God. So it's still an appeal to ignorance. It's just he phrased it in a way that doesn't seem like it's an appeal to ignorance anymore. Isn't that clever? It's still an appeal to ignorance, but now it doesn't sound as bad, at least.
Not interested? This is a religion? So, the first thing we know about God is that he's original.
No, the first thing you know about God is nothing. You don't know anything about God. Now, the reason I say that is because God is not a known thing. It is a asserted thing. There is a difference. You, Rabbi, do know what people have said God is. You know what the Torah and the Talmud say about God. You know what other people and rabbis say about God. But you do not know what God is, because that information is something that you do not possess. How do I know that you do not possess that information? Because you have not demonstrated that you possess that information. Here is God. Now that we have seen it, here's how it works. Blah, blah, blah. Look, we do this. We can figure out it works this way, and it has this property, yada, yada, yada. We don't have that here, Rabbi. What we have here is bald assertion on top of bald assertion, and that's it. That's all we have. The first thing you know about God is your assertion. That's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the assertion that God is X, and that comes from your beliefs in God, which come from the holy book that you read, the Torah and the. I mean, I don't know if Talmud's also a holy book or not. Talmud's kind of like rabbi commentary on the Torah, but it is also used in culture stuff or whatever. I don't know that much about it. I'm not an expert on the Talmud. I just like the word Talmud because it sounds like mud, like towing mud, Talmud. Like I'm towing that mud along. I don't know. It's a fun word, Talmud. I'm gonna say it one more time. Talmud. Okay. Maybe 10 more times. Talmud. Okay, so all right. Anyways, Talmud. So my point, Talmud, is that here we have nothing but assertions what you think God is based upon writings, essentially, that you think those writings describe God. Okay, why do you think those writings describe God? What evidence do you have that those writings are correct about God? And if you don't have any evidence there, then your assumptions about God, your assertions about God are without warrant, without evidence, without proof. So all you're doing now is appealing to something that somebody wrote that said something is true, but not being able to demonstrate that that is true. Now, you might say it's an authority. If you do that, it's an appeal to authority. You might say it's holy. You can't question it. It's an appeal to holiness. That you might say any number of things to try to defend it, but unless you have some way to demonstrate that the words in the Bible, or well, in this case, the Torah, the words in the Torah about God are actually accurate, then all you're doing is guessing that those words are accurate. So the first thing you know about God is actually nothing. What you believe about God is the following.
If everything else was created, then the creator cannot himself be created.
All right. Well, if everything else besides this thing was created, then that thing is not created. But this runs into the problem of special plating. Why isn't that thing also created? Well, it's special. I understand that you think it's special. But when we have categories, we like to have them be something set in some sort of formulaic way that makes coherent sense. This is a non-created entity that has always existed for all time because there is no explanation for the explanation. Why does God exist? It just does. It can't not exist because you need a thing to create everything else. Why do you need a thing to create everything else? Because you do. It reminds me of the talk in the movie Idiosyncrasy where they're like, why are you using this thing to water plants? And they're like, well, it's got it's got this stuff in it. Why is it, and it's like, why does it have the stuff in it? Because that's what plants crave. Why do plants crave it? Because it's in that brano. Why is it in brano? It's got what plants craves, you know. And they just keep going around, in circles. Uh, and I can't remember what it is that brano has. It's got it though. Brano glots it. What is it? The damn thing. What's it called? Oh God, what's the quote? Oh my word! Yes, I'm gonna waste time on this quote. It's electrolytes. That's it. It's got electrolytes. yes. Okay. Why does Brano have electrolytes? Because plants crave it. Why do plants crave Brano? Because it's got electrolytes. It's a perfect circle. See, it answers. So why is God the thing that made the universe? Because it's God. But why couldn't it be something else? Because God is special. Well, okay, but couldn't the thing that made the universe be some other special thing? No. Why? Because it just is. How do you know that?
You got to start with something that already exists.
Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. These are more assertions about the true nature of reality, which is something, last I checked, I don't think that there's been a consensus about that in science. I could be wrong, nor is there a consensus in philosophy about it either. Turning to religion doesn't help. Religion doesn't have a consensus about the true nature of reality. So there is nowhere that I am aware of where you could turn to and say, I have a consensus about what the true nature of reality is. Because you'd have to go to a small subsection within that. You're not going to find it in science unless you go, hey, let's just look at the creationists that also happen to be scientists, quote unquote, not enough quotes in the universe to put around the word scientists in the creationist people because they don't do science anymore, and they will have an assertion about how the universe came to be. Okay, but you're looking at a very small subset. You're not looking at a larger subset, right? Let's look at humanity. Does humanity in general have a consensus about the true nature of reality? No, but a consensus doesn't mean it's true, obviously, okay, but it would be good to have because at least you'd have something to examine. You'd be like, all these people have this thing that they all agree on. There must be some reason they all agree on it. What's that reason? Well, I don't know. Maybe one religion took over the world, and that's the reason why everybody believes a similar thing. Or maybe it's that the demonstrable evidence is so great that everybody in the entire world agrees with it. Like, I don't know, the world being round, or well, obloid, spheroid, but spherical in nature. Okay, pretty much everybody in the entire world agrees upon that reality. The very small subset of people that don't believe a different idea because they have a bunch of beliefs that they believe on top of their belief that then forms this hypothetical realm where everybody is lying to them and everyone else in the world because reasons. And if you dig deep enough, usually you find the reason is God and the Bible and a certain way to view certain verses in the Bible that say that the world is flat, according to them. Not all flat earthers ultimately go to God for why the world is flat, but many do. So you then have a subset of a subset. The true nature of reality is that the world is actually flat. They figured it out somehow. Everyone else is lying to us because reasons. Why are they lying to us? Don't need to know. Don't need the explanation of the explanation. All you need to know is that it looks flat. I haven't seen that it looks spherical. I haven't done any experiments, but I need to figure it out on my own because I can't trust anyone but me. And then if you do those experiments, you actually find that it's spherical, but then you're just going to find reasons to reinforce your belief because your belief is comforting to you. Because if you're comforted by the belief, then it wins out over a non-comforting fact. Now, that was a long tangent to go on to make the point that when it comes to the true nature of reality, I think it would be fair to say we don't have a bleeping clue about it, which means that anything you say about the true nature of reality, Rabbi, is nothing but an appeal to ignorance. I don't know how reality came about. Therefore, God, you're doing the same thing that you just complained about the other guy doing that you said was dumb. So you're repeating the same dumb argument. Why are you doing that? Is it because you got nothing else? I don't know. I'm just saying, why? Talmud.
Why does he exist? Because he's different. He's not like us. His existence is real, ours is manufactured.
Are you sure you want to put manufactured as a category that doesn't also belong to the category of real? You do realize what that would mean, right? Like how words work. Like, I'm just saying, look, okay. So if we're to seriously separate categories like this, you have what's real versus what's manufactured. So what's manufactured is not real then, right? Because they're two separate categories, meaning that everything is not real except for God, if it's all been manufactured. But it gets worse than that because the things we manufacture are less real than we are. And then if we got a thing that we made to make something else, then that's even less real. So my brother has a 3D printer. It prints stuff. Like you tell it what to do, but it doesn't, right? So that's a thing that we made making another thing. So the thing that's now made is now less real than the other thing that was already not real because it was because the computer and the 3D printer are manufactured, but the thing made a thing, and so that's even less real than the other thing. And so it's like, and then my brother's also not real because he was manufactured. So we've got a not real thing manufacturing a not real thing that's using a not real thing to make a not real thing that's even less real than the thing. Maybe Rabbi didn't think out what he was saying, though. Maybe he doesn't mean that. But I think that he doesn't think about any of the things and just says stuff because, that's what he's doing. But that's okay. I'm doing the thinking for him, whether I'm real or manufactured or whatever. Woo!
So if you don't assume that before we existed, something real existed, then we're just ignorant.
If you don't assume that something existed before we existed, then you're just ignorant. Okay. If you do assume that something existed before we existed, then you're just ignorant. Neither of those statements is an argument. Both of those statements are an appeal to consequence and or poisoning of the well and or an ad hominem of some sort and or an appeal to emotions that you don't want to be seen as ignorant, therefore you're going to reject the idea. None of those statements are good statements to make of the. So, Rabbi, look, if you don't assume X is true, then you're ignorant. If you don't assume that deconverted man's a lobster, then you're just ignorant. You're just dumb. If you don't give a like to the video and leave a comment, you're just a pathetic, moronic person who likes to lick Germania's big toe. That's what you are. Now, maybe you're Germania, in which case you like to lick your own big toe. You know which one. I don't have to tell you which foot either, because you know what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty sure later on tonight, you're going to say, you're going to wash your feet and you're going to be like, hey, girl, check it out. I got this idea. Lick my big toe. And she'll be like, where did you get that idea? Shut up. Just do it. I want to know if I like it or not. And you never know. You might have found a new fetish thanks to your friend, Deconverted Man. It's just a small favor that I do for people in chat sometimes. For example, Captive Desk has a fetish all about something terrible and horrible that I'm going to explain after this.
Then we don't understand this world. We don't understand anything about ourselves. We know nothing.
Well, Rabbi, you certainly don't know nothing. Wait, does that mean he do knows nothing? Would that mean if he don't know nothing, then that means you do know something, right? Because the don't, see, makes the negative into a positive when there's two don'ts, and then, wait, huh? Okay, so if you don't assume, wait, what did he say that I was complaining about before going off into the foot fetish rant? Talmud, that's what it was. Let's go back a bit, because I forget now.
Then we're just ignorant.
Oh, yeah.
Something real existed. If you don't assume that before we existed, something real existed.
Okay, before we existed, something real existed. Yeah, reality, whatever that is still real. I mean, I don't know that you have to assume that. I think that's kind of, I don't know what you have to do. You could demonstrate it, I suppose, unless you're like a Last Thursdayist or whatever. If you're not heard of the Last Thursdayists, they're a fun group of people that probably don't exist. Not in the sense that he doesn't exist or that I don't exist because we're manufactured, but in a different case. But anyways, if you believe in this is how it goes. So last Thursday, everything poofed into existence. In the universe, the world, everything, including your memories of the past, all started last Thursday. Now, there's no way to prove that that's true, but even better, there's no way to prove that it's false either. And you go, well, what are we supposed to do with that? You're supposed to discard it as an idea because you can't show that it's true or false. When you can't falsify something, then you just leave it alone. And you go, that's an interesting idea, but I don't care because there's nothing to it. And so come back when you have proof. It's sort of similar to that we're all brains in jars, or that this is all the Matrix, or whatever, stuff like that. It's like, look, that's nice, but until you have proof that it's a thing, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so reality existed before I existed. Yeah, sure. Reality existed because reality is, a thing that's real, whatever that is. So you go before the universe, which is what I think he meant to say before us. He meant to say before the whole universe. Before that was still reality, because, well, reality, whatever the bleep it is still reality. However that works, ultimately, the true nature of reality, which I say is an unknown for now. Perhaps we'll figure it out. Maybe it's unknowable. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not doing that hard work to figure it out. But what I'm also not doing, and I strongly advise against doing, is asserting how it works without some way to demonstrably demonstrate that that's how it all works. So before the universe was, there was still something. Well, I don't know if the word something is appropriate, but to say before the universe, reality was still a thing. Fine. Okay, sure. But whether you assume that or not, it's irrelevant. And also appealing to a consequence of, if you don't assume it, then you are moronic, whatever the word you want to use is. That is a bad argumentation, because it doesn't compel us logically to get to the conclusion you want us to get to. There is a prior past. Here's how, and there's many ways that we could demonstrate and show that to be true without having to appeal to erroneous logic to do so, Rabbi.
Then we're just ignorant. Then we don't understand this world. We don't understand anything about ourselves. We know nothing.
Oh no, how terrible. But that might be the case. We don't know everything there is to know. So what? What's your point?
So it is completely compelling and logical that in the beginning, there was something that didn't need to be created.
No, it's neither, well, whether it's compelling or not, it's completely and wholly subjective, and is completely and wholly irrelevant in the realm of logic. Now you're like, oh, now I know why Deconverted Man did this video, because he said the word logic. No, I'm doing this video because I found it. But yes, he said the word logic, and now it's time for me to school him on logic. Because what you're doing here is an appeal to emotion. It's compelling, maybe to you, but maybe to somebody else it isn't. So let's just drop that. We don't need that emotional appeal here, okay? So what was the next part you said? Okay, hold on. Let's go back a little bit. What was... All right, press.
That in the beginning, there was something that didn't need to be created.
Okay, so in the beginning, whatever you mean by that, there was something that didn't need to be created. This assumes that anything was in fact created in the first place. See, by using the word created, you're assuming there was a creation, and that in terms assumes there was a creator. I don't do that. I don't go, oh, look, before reality existed, reality needed a realtor, see, and the realtor had to sell reality to itself to then buy reality. Then we had reality. And then once we had reality, then we could have a universe, see. I don't need to assume anything or assert anything about reality in the way that you do about creation. Reality, whatever its true nature is, however the bleep it actually works, existed and has existed because it can't not exist. It's just that's what it is. It's real. Whatever is real is real. Okay. So whatever isn't real isn't a thing because it's not real. Yeah, that works. Okay. So in the beginning, in the start, at the very start, when we had just reality, we don't know what that's like. Not yet. Scientists haven't figured it out. Cosmologists are come up with a lot of different ideas, but we're not sure of which of those ideas is the best idea to go with. Some are the one that has the most explanatory power eventually will win out. But we're not there yet for many different technical reasons that I'm sure you totally understand, Rabbi, so I won't bore you with the explanations. Yeah, he totally understands all that, right? Okay, but the thing is, we don't need a creation. We just need that there's a reality. And remember the thing that I read about energy being zero and all that? Well, so if this true nature of reality is that energy is not created nor destroyed, energy just is, and that space just is, then also when you begin the universe, you also begin time, because time and space are basically like the same thing for all intents and purposes. I don't understand Einstein or pretend to, so I could be completely wrong on what I just said. Take it with a huge grain of sugar and or salt. But you didn't have it before because you didn't have time. So to say the word before is incoherent. So if there is no time before time. So you can't say anything about before because there isn't a before. Everything just starts now. Okay. But before that, what was there? No, there is no before. Okay, so there was a point when there was no time. Well, no, because there's no space either. So there is no where or when that nothing ever was. So you go, well, wait. So before the universe was reality a thing? Yeah. Well, what's that look like without the universe? I have no idea. No idea. I don't know. Well, did time and space exist? I don't know. Maybe in a different universe. I have no idea. How does any of that work? Nobody knows. And that's amazing. That's great. That's fascinating. That's endlessly wonderful. And I could say all sorts of cool things about it, but none of those appeals to emotions are relevant. What matters is it's the truth. We don't know that there has to be a thing before any of the other things. In fact, it might very well be the case that there was no before, and that seems to be the case. And then they say, okay, there was reality, and then there was the reality that we know. Is there a change from one to the other, or is it that that natural language falls apart because we're trying to say things in terms like we normally use because we're used to things having a before and an after, and when we get to this point, there's no causality anymore because there isn't a before. There's just an after. And we don't know what to do about that. We can't conceptualize that. And our physics breaks down, and we can't use logic on it either because it's such a conundrum to us. But maybe we'll figure it out one day. But we won't figure it out by simply asserting that it must be this or it must be that, because all that is an appeal to ignorance.
You can take it back 16 billion years, 100 billion years. That's not the point. Somewhere, something was real, because we are not.
You heard it. He said it. Remember that whole rant I had when he's like, surely he's not separating us from real. But no, he is. Let's listen again, just so we know.
100 billion years. That's not the point. somewhere something was real, because we are not.
Somewhere, something was real because we are not. We are not real, Rabbi? Okay. Wow. All right. So Rabbi thinks we're not real. There you go. I was making fun of it before, but no, he really thinks that we're not real. That's what he said. That's what he said.
Meaning we're not real by the fact that
We needed to be created.
We needed to be created. Another bald assertion. We didn't need to be created. Nothing created us in that sense. There's no sense where that makes any sense. We, you mean humans? We weren't created. We evolved throughout time. Okay, you rewind that back to the bacteria. That didn't need to be created. It was forming in different heat areas of oceans and whatever the heck else it was doing. None of that needed creating. All the minerals that were there, all the elements that were there that became those bacteria and whatever the earliest thing was, all that chemical stuff, that was already there. That didn't need to be created. Okay, so you go back before the earth was. You go back before the sun was. Then you get to a point where there's a few stars that have to explode to create the elements. We finally get to an actual creation. But it's the stars dying for us that made those heavy elements possible. There's the only point when you could actually say anything about created would be via the stars exploding and spilling their rich guts across the universe. Those stars are truly what created the conditions necessary for us to be us. Well, kind of. They gave the stuff that we would need to then eventually build into the thing that would eventually become us. But they didn't know that because they're stars. They don't know anything. And then stars before those stars had to explode to get those stars to exist in the first place. And there's another possible use of the word creation there. But I would not really want to use the word create there either because of its association with this religious mumbo jumbo. Although that might be the only word that we have. The star, when it exploded, well, what do we say? I don't like the word create. Made? No, that still sounds, I don't know. They produced, okay, say they produced the chemicals that would then formed more stars that then exploded again to make even more complex chemicals. There you go. They produced it. And no, production doesn't need a producer. So, yeah, I guess, words hard of. Anyways, Talmud. Let's go back to the video.
Manufactured.
it's logically a logical conclusion based on the fact that
we didn't always exist.
That is the opposite of a logical conclusion. Because you didn't even have a syllogism, but nothing you said led to the next thing. Because we haven't always existed, therefore, what? Then there has to be a thing that made all the things. Well, we know to some extent that the suns had to be there to make the heavy elements and et cetera, Before the suns, though, okay, there had to be a thing that made the suns. Well, made is not quite correct because the suns came to be because of gravity, but there was all this stuff in the universe. Well, why was all this stuff there? Well, because it was. But didn't that have to be made? Well, it was a result of the processes that came before it. But then you get to this point where you go, okay, now you don't have time or space. And you go, well, what the hell happened to causality? And causality is not a thing. There is no before. There is no cause. If there's no before, there's no cause. And you go, but how can you have an uncaused universe? I don't know. But that's a possibility. And that's just as much as a possibility as any other possibility that is actually possible. The difference between scientific hypotheses and theories and your assertions, Rabbi, is ours, and by that I mean scientists, are testable. Your assertions about God are not testable at all, nor demonstratable at all. You say logical, and that just makes me laugh.
The world.
Mhm. So then the question would be, if there exists something that doesn't need to be created, which means it's eternal, it always was and always will be. We are not. If there is something that always was and always will be, why would he create the world?
You've gone from one assumption to another. You've gone from the question of if there is to an assertion about what that means. If there is this thing, and I don't know why it has to last forever, by the way, it not needing to be created, okay, sure, why not? Whatever, it's always existed, whatever it is. Okay, cool. Then it blew up in order to make the universe. It's dead now. It's gone. Don't exist no more. It died to make the universe. Well, that wouldn't be God, though, according to him. But what if that was God? For all I know, maybe God was a thing. Sure, why not? And maybe even God was intelligent. Why not? Again, I don't know. Sure. And God was bored and was like, this is boring. I've existed for all this time. That's it. Hey, if I destroyed myself, I can make a universe that would have life in it. That'd be cool. I guess I'll do that. Boom! Universe. Now it's dead. Which would make both the atheists and the theists wrong because God did exist but died in order to make the universe. But then atheists are technically right because they don't believe that there is a God currently. But there was one once, so then they technically be wrong, which is my favorite type of being wrong. Also, technically correct is my favorite type of being correct. Works both ways, technically speaking, which is my favorite type of technical. Oh, that's it.
If you
That's
enjoyed this conversation or this topic,
No, I didn't. Not really. I mean, I didn't. But just for fun, I do have one last thing to show you. Here's a history of human blood groups and stuff. It's just like the first thing I found when I Googled, how does human blood evolve? That whole thing about not knowing how human blood got here. Yeah, it seems like scientists have figured that out. See, you were wrong about that, Rabbi. But that shouldn't surprise us because he was wrong about pretty much everything that he said. Yeah, except for the part when he said that it was a dumb argument. I agree. But your argument was even dumber, Rabbi. All your argument is a restructuring of I don't know, must be God. That's all it is. That's all your argument is. You're making assertions that you don't know that are true. You're bald assertioning your way, and you're also doing special pleading because this thing doesn't need to do the thing that everything else needs to do because it's special. Why? That's just the way it is. The thing that existed before all the other stuff has to exist for all time. Well, no, it just has to exist long enough to make the next thing, which happened to be us. Then it can stop existing. It doesn't need to keep existing. But you need it to keep existing because that's what it says about the thing that you're asserting that exists that you haven't demonstrated that exists at all, not even a little. So yes, Rabbi Manis Friedman, this is the dumbest attempt to prove that God exists that I've ever heard. Well, actually, that's not true. I've heard far worse, but this is pretty down low on the list. All right, so is there a good attempt at proving God exists? Well, I don't know of any. If you think you know of something, let me know what that is, what it's called, and if you can't post it on the comments because YouTube deletes it, email it to me at deconvertedman1@gmail.com. That's one the number, not one the word. It's a very confusing thing. Why am I that way named of? Because Google did it to me, and that's what happened, and that was the thing. So, bottom line is, maybe it's a God, but I don't have any reason to think it's a God right now because I have no empirical evidence, no repeatable tests, and certainly it did not have a valid and sound argument. So unless and until we do have a valid and sound argument, we should be skeptical of the conclusions. Hey, I did the ending without screwing up. What do you think, Professor? Professor? You're not a professor. You're my producer. Whatever you are. What's that? Still on the air? Ah, shit. Oh, and I forgot to say the